So there was a good amount of questions asked on my Instagram story. They're kind of surprised how quickly. So I'll go over the Instagram questions first before I get into like frequently asked questions by clients. I'm going to try to keep this short because Instagram only allows you like 3 minutes. I'll split it up into parts. I mean, they allow you more, but then it kind of affects reach. And so I'm going to try to keep it to like 3 minutes and then I'll split it because it's going to go longer. So I'll just go through here. Starting with, have you worked with anyone who has severe allergies? And so, yes, all the time, 24/7. And so, how I explain this to people is what we try to figure out is like, okay, is it actually an allergy or is it an imbalanced immune system? Or, for example, there's a lot of evidence showing things like quorum sensing. And so, what quorum sensing is, it's sensing of like infections. So, the infections in your gut can communicate with the infections in your brain, kind of idea. So, what they say is, are you allergic to a dog or a cat, or are the infections just communicating with each other? And so there's a lot of evidence on that. And so I work with people to figure out, okay, is that what it is? Like, is it just an infectious based thing that's creating an immune imbalance? And do we treat that? Or, is it a mast cell response, et cetera? Yes, some people are just allergic to things. We look at that from a quantum level, even, but a lot of the times it's something underlying, like an infection leading to an imbalanced immune response, which is causing the allergies, especially when we talk about like eosinophilic activation and whatnot. So, yes, I work with lots of allergies. Do you still recommend glutathione for liver support? I recommend it for so much more than liver support. I'm actually going to be creating posts on this. When your cell is in that cell danger response, and that cell danger response in our society is constantly being stimulated, it actually strategically downregulates glutathione. And so what we see are low levels of glutathione. So we're losing our ability to reduce oxidative stress and modulate inflammation. And what little glutathione we do have is more delegated towards like the liver or the heart. So these other tissues are not getting in, they're becoming damaged because we don't have glutathione repairing them. So I'm a big advocate of glutathione. Now, oral form isn't the most effective, unfortunately. Like, it's better than nothing, but you really have trouble digesting it, or sorry, absorbing it through the digestion, even though it's liposomal form. And so you have to do quite a bit. Injection is the way to go. And remember, none of this is medical advice, blah, blah, blah. So it's much better in injection form, but I definitely don't expect anyone to do injections. But that's just a piece of information that I've come to see. It doesn't work overly well in oral form. Preconception and prenatal recs. So recommendations. So you, the mother, are going to be passing your mitochondria on to the child. So you want to make sure that your mitochondria are healthy. And there are many women who are sick and then having a child. And then as generation goes on, there's more and more diseases coming. And we can just see like the rise of diseases just keeps escalating. And so you want to make sure that your mitochondria are healthy. So it's ensuring that your environment is safe. If you've been following me, I talk about light and dark cycles and reducing EMFs and getting sunrise and getting grounding and all these kind of things. So that's number one, like making sure that that environment is safe. So you have healthy mitochondria. And when women are experiencing a lot of issues during pregnancy, especially things like vomiting and such, it's the mitochondria is what it is. It can be gallbladder related for sure, with the rise of estrogen negatively impacting the sphincter, but it's a lot to do with mitochondria, and they're just trying to protect you. So we end up vomiting. I gotta stop saying we, my apologies. Women end up vomiting, and that is because the mitochondria doesn't want the baby to become toxic or anything. So it's eliminating anything that could potentially harm the baby. So a lot to do with mitochondria. Phosphatidylcholine is extremely important pre, during, post, etc. That is a really big one. When you look at prenatal vitamins and stuff like that, I recommend organ supplements or just eat organ meat, because when you look at prenatals, multivitamins, etc., it's all marketing. They're full of so many different things that conflict, and you don't know what's doing what. And so when we look at organ meats, they're nature's multivitamin. And so if you're not willing to eat organ meat, I say look at an organ supplement for that. And I'm sure there's many more. It gets very nuanced though, based off the person, but just think mitochondria. You want your mitochondria to be healthy. Like a year prior, you want to work on these things, conceive, and keep them healthy during. So phosphatidylcholine is a very, very big one, but the environment's still number one. So what are peptides? So this is like, I'm not going to provide the scientific explanation of peptides. I'm going to provide like how I kind of view them and explain them. And so What peptides are is they're just a sequence of amino acids that can enhance normal physiological processes. And I use the term enhance, which is why you have to be super careful with peptides. They're becoming all the rage now. And of course, everyone falls victim to it, myself included. And we can really mess ourselves up with peptides. We can also make the impossible possible with peptides. They're just absolutely tremendous, but people don't understand how to use them. And it's always ChatGPT. All their information is coming from ChatGPT or some Reddit forum or something, which the Reddit forum might be a little better than ChatGPT. But it's, like they can really enhance physiological processes. They can stimulate processes that haven't been stimulated in a while or just are not being stimulated at all. They can really promote healing. And so they more easily get into the cell. So when we're experiencing that cell danger response, it goes into containment mode and it becomes very rigid and it doesn't really want to accept a lot of nutrients. And this is why supplements just don't work for sick people. So a peptide can more easily enter the cell, stimulating whatever sort of process that the peptide is designed to do. And so these things are like derived from tissues and stuff. And so like, yeah, a lot of them are synthetic, but they're the same sequences from like natural organs and things like that. So they can be perfectly safe when used appropriately. And obviously like GLP-1s, I believe, are what made peptides super famous. And, now they're being demonized because so many people are messing themselves up with GLP-1s. But GLP-1s have amazing systemic benefits significantly beyond weight loss, but that's at like micro dosing and utilized appropriately with other methods and such. And so just people just don't know how to utilize peptides, and they're getting their information from ChatGPT, which just doesn't work. Maybe basic protocols like BPC and TB500, those ones can be very safe. It can feed into cancer and stuff, so you got to be careful there. But yeah, the tangent aside, they're just shorter sequences of amino acids that can enhance physiological processes. And because they're amino acids, they don't get recognized by the immune system because the immune system recognizes protein. What are your thoughts on CrossFit? So I think you're trying to get me in trouble here, but I mean, like, I'm sure it's a lot of fun. It looks like fun, and it's definitely a challenge of someone's grit and determination. But I work mainly with healing. I think it has zero application whatsoever in a healing journey. People don't understand that exercise is inflammation, it's oxidative stress, and it's not what you do in the gym, it's what you recover from. So we are all about stress and adapt, stress and adapt. We don't adapt without stress. This is another reason why peptides can be very harmful, because if you blunt the stress mechanism, then you don't get the adaptation mechanism. And that's how we don't grow, heal, survive, etc. So CrossFit is just such like way on the far spectrum of like damage to the body. And many people who are sick will not recover. There's no way they will recover from that. So in terms of like healing, I think it's a terrible idea. If you're a healthy individual, I still don't think it's a great idea. We look at injuries and everything, and depending on what the stimulus is, it's a very kitchen sink approach when it comes to training stimuli. So I'm not a big fan of CrossFit. It looks like a lot of fun. Like I would do it just to see how out of shape I am, but yeah, I'm not a big fan of CrossFit. How important is diet once you get an autoimmune condition into remission? So, I mean, it's environmental dependent, right? And it could be the most important thing, or you could be able to really slack off it. My job is I try to help people slack because, you want to enjoy your life, and, social events, eating out and stuff like that is quite enjoyable for a lot of people. So my goal is to, create a foundation where the body can tolerate, off plan types of foods and whatnot. And so I really like Dr. Jack Cruz. He's a little extreme, but he says that the problem is not the fuel, it's the engine. So the problem isn't the food, it's the mitochondria. And he has lots of evidence to back that up. And we can see that, like, my best friend means the world to me, but he's a piece of garbage when it comes to his diet. I'll admit he's getting better because of his fiance, but he's obviously not the epitome of health, but he's not diseased, right? And so like genetically, environmentally, he's got healthy mitochondria. And so that's where it's like you improve those things or support them, right? Because like a lot of times, remember, you inherit your mitochondria from your mother. So it's probably going to be lifelong support when it comes to the mitochondria, unless you can nail down your environment to be perfect, which we know is practically impossible for a lot of people. So then the diet, it might be really strict, or you just support the mitochondria more and you can tolerate more of the diet. So that's, I know that probably doesn't really answer the question. It's a little more nuanced, but yeah. That's my answer. Are other peptides as expensive as GLP-1s? So here's what I say. GLP-1s are not expensive. They're actually very cheap. It's their initial cost. Yeah, like I know $215 for semaglutide on one of the Canadian sites, but that's going to last. If you do 100 mcg Monday and Thursday, 10,000 divided by 200 math, that's what? That's a lot of months, 8 months, whatever, right? It lasts quite a while. So they're actually very affordable. Where it becomes expensive is depending on the case, depending on the person, right? Not a GLP-1 though, because nobody should be running high doses of GLP-1. They don't need it. A micro dose is totally fine, unless it's like extreme weight loss, but now we see all the problems with it. So the price of GLP-1s will probably go up because they're going to catch on that people are realizing that the high doses are not healthy, but the lower doses are very beneficial. So that's a little unfortunate, but it just depends on the case. It depends on the context. It depends on the person. And so it's like peptides can be quite affordable, or yeah, they could be very, very expensive. Like if you tear your rotator cuff or whatever, you're going to want to do BPC and TB500 at like 10 milligrams, maybe a day for a couple of days. Like that's pretty expensive. But if you're just going for basic regeneration or whatever, doing 250 mcg of BPC and TB500, then that could be quite affordable for some people. So it's very context dependent and whatnot. But GLP-1s are definitely not expensive when you do them as they should be done. And then where are we here? Okay. Have you worked with anyone trying to get off psych meds for bipolar? 1,000% yes. And so a lot of medications, what I've experienced is you can just come off of them. Like you create the foundation and you can just come off of them. You get your health back and then you can come off of them, like biologics, for example, steroids, etc. With psych meds, you really need like a replacement is what I find. And I don't mean like a crutch kind of idea, but when we look at like a lot of meds, they're going to downregulate certain neurotransmitters, or they are going to try to increase the availability of a specific neurotransmitter, but then that's going to increase the enzyme that breaks down the neurotransmitter and downregulate the receptors in the brain. So one, we have to look at improving the receptors in the brain. Two, we got to look at like liver and methylation because all medications are going to affect the liver negatively. Three, it's okay, as mentioned, that enzyme that breaks down these neurotransmitters usually gets really upregulated. And so that's where we look at replacing. And so there are many methods to help inhibit monoamine oxidase, for example, that breaks down serotonin or slow down catechol-methyltransferase, COMT. So it's more about replacing. And when you do it that way, a lot of people can be quite successful with it. So yeah, definitely have helped a lot of people do that. And then what do peptides help with? Everything. So what I've kind of been saying lately is it's 2025. Our resources are ridiculous, practically unlimited. Like there is so many things out there that we could do to heal, to promote performance, to promote cognitive enhancement, to grow muscles, whatever, right? Our resources are unlimited. And when used responsibly, appropriately, in the right context, the opportunities are endless. And so what do peptides help with? Literally anything you could probably think of, right? I don't think they could help you fly, but they could do a lot of things for your biology, your physiology. But once again, does that mean you should be doing them? Not always. We have to remember that if our body is experiencing a symptom, then it's a signal and we need to listen to that signal. And we're not listening to that signal. We're just trying to take a bunch of supplements to mask a symptom and whatnot. Or we're like, oh, it's an underlying infection. And so we go after that, which yeah, okay. But you want to create a foundation first before really utilizing peptides because they can really disrupt signals and mess things up long term. And like this is the problem with peptides is people get so gung-ho on them because they had such a great initial experience or their clients did or something, but then they don't understand the long-term mechanisms or what's happening at a mitochondrial level when you do peptides. Remember, like your biology still stands where it's not used to injecting peptides. It's not. And so we have to take that into consideration. But they can help with literally anything, like literally anything. They have tremendous application. We're talking about like vision reversal if you're wearing glasses and contacts. We're talking about brain degenerative diseases can be reversed. We're talking cancers, anything you could think of. Peptides could do a lot, a lot. Much more or much better than supplements ever will, right? Which is why you also have to be careful though. I'll always say that. What peptides do you recommend the most? That's very, that can get very nuanced. If I had to, if I had to pick one based off of everybody, I would say SS31 because SS31 is designed to be just a pure mitochondrial healing peptide. So it stimulates the cardiolipin, which is the membrane in the inner mitochondria. So it heals that membrane. Once again, does that mean you should do it? Not always. Does that mean you should do it long term? Maybe, right? It gets very nuanced. But if I had to pick one, let's just say you had a gun to my head. If I had to pick one, I would say SS31. You know, like that should theoretically on paper be safe for everyone. I've seen it not be though, because I've seen it create more reactive oxygen species. That's very context though, like what's going on with the person. So you have to be careful. But once again, if I had to pick one, I would say SS31. I would pick that over BPC and TB500, which I believe are the most common. I would pick that over GLP-1s, things like that. So if I had to say, I would say SS31. And then so much for this being short, whatever, I guess I won't cut it into small ones. I'll just leave it as a whole. And then last question for now, how important is it to avoid folic acid in foods and stuff for someone who has the MTHFR gene mutation? So MTHFR, methyl tetrahydrofolate reductase. Okay, there is so much out there showing that we don't need to worry about MTHFR as much as we think we do. So remember, you are a product of your environment, and everyone needs to learn or realize the cell danger response. We are experiencing this chronically stuck cell danger response. And one of the mechanisms of that cell danger response is to strategically downregulate methylation. So how I explain methylation in a very simplified, hopefully form is methylation controls a lot, detox, gene expression, etc. And when we look at it in the context of genetics, let's say you have a ladder and this ladder at the top is ultimate health and wellness. And if you have a genetic SNP, so single nucleotide polymorphism, so a mutation, think of it as a broken step on that ladder. So if you are poorly methylating because someone says you have a bad MTHFR gene, every time you try to climb that ladder, you're going to step on that broken step and fall back down. If you are properly methylating, you will climb that ladder and step over that broken step and continue to climb up to ultimate health and wellness. That's why genes don't dictate. They're not your destiny, right? Epigenetics, environment, etc. So when they say they have the MTHFR gene, they have trouble stimulating that methylation cycle. I explain the folate cycle as the ignition on your vehicle. It's what starts your engine. And so people will take B vitamins and they will feel better, but is it because it's supporting the MTHFR gene, or is it just because they were B vitamin deficient and the B vitamins really help with energy production and whatnot? And so when we go into that cell danger response, we see that downregulation of methylation. And that's because the cell is protecting you. It doesn't want to feed into infections with that methylation. It wants to go into conservative mode because it needs resources for other things involved in the cell danger response. And so when we see this, it's like, okay, is the problem the MTHFR defect, or is it the environment? Is it a cell danger response? Is it an infection? Is it trauma, right? Is it a really bad person in your life? Things like that. And so that's more important to focus on than avoiding folic acid. But yeah, like when you look at foods, like I know what you're referring to, when you look at these kind of foods, there's not great foods in general anyways. And so it's not really about the folic acid, it's just about the poor food. And that's where context is so important. And that's the problem with social media is they're like, oh, folic acid and these foods are so bad for you. Don't eat these foods because of folic acid. Maybe don't eat them because they're garbage is what it is, right? Never mind the folic acid. So that's really big, but I'm really trying to educate people to not get so hung up on genetics. Yes, guilty, been there myself, right? Done lots of genetic testing. Yeah, I can still help even though I'm saying this. But when it comes to that MTHFR gene, it's not as big of a problem as people think it is. Am I saying don't support it? No, that's not what I'm saying by any means. Am I saying it's not a problem at all? No, don't put words in my mouth like everyone does. It's just, you need to shift your focus away from, oh, I just need to take B vitamins and watch that I don't eat foods with folic acid, and focus more on your environment and your membrane health, etc. And you won't have to worry about that MTHFR gene. And so I get asked that question a lot about the gene defect, or a lot of people tell me, and there's research out there showing that it's not as much of a problem as people think it is, because just because you have that gene, that does not mean you are expressing it. So that was 20 minutes long almost. Yeah, sorry about that, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed that though. I would like to do this more and more, just as some a little bit of long form content for Instagram. I'm not going to post it to YouTube or anything. I just don't care about YouTube anymore. Too much work. Rather put my efforts elsewhere. But yeah, like I said, I'm going to put up one of those Ask Me Anything at least once a week. and I'll also take questions that I frequently get asked by clients and stuff like that. And yeah, like don't be afraid to drop a comment with questions, or if you want me to expand on anything that was said in this video and whatnot. So hopefully you guys like that.